peak alpha frequency above 10. The higher, the more smarter. The smarter the person is. The higher, the smarter the person is, right? So let's look at this guy's peak alpha frequency because he's 11 years old. So we come to the alpha, which is the peak, the highest peak, and we can look at it from the table. So PC, look at his alpha, 7.32. It's very, very low for somebody who's age 10. If this was somebody who's 60 or older, I would start suspecting a dementia case or some kind of neurodegenerative disorder. But for this kid, look at that. I mean, ADHD, 7.32, so his IQ is suffering. So we can train. We don't necessarily have to train at the source of the discharge. It's not necessary to do that. So we could do some C4 to PC protocol to help with this IQ. And what are we going to suppress? Again, look at this. The delta, the theta, the alpha, and the fast frequencies. And we're going to suppress the delta, the theta, the alpha, and fast frequencies. Or we could do a P4 training to target the discharge. Where would I start? I would start with the discharge. I would start at P4 before I do anything else. That's where I would go. But you can probably tell me, no, I would probably do P3, or I'll do PC, or I'll do FC. I mean, again, the real expert is the client. That's who the real expert is. All right? Makes more sense? Yeah. Feeling more depressed by the minute? When I need some neurofeedback? So, I want to show you this. This is a case that I treated recently for a 13-year-old female who came with complaints of poor academic performance. So we did, this is the pre and the post map after 20 sessions. So that's so I want you to pay attention to the main activity, which is this one, FC, the frontal area, right? Because that's where we did the training. And I'm gonna open up the other file so you can compare and contrast. So we're gonna go like this, and let's switch them around. So this is case number one, map number one. This is map number two. All right. So I want you to focus on the FZ area. See the activity right there? Look at this. See that? And I'm going to fast forward. See that? So this is 20 sessions. This is up to 20 sessions. Watch that. Watch all the slow brain wave activity. See that right there? Look at that. Look at that. Do you see it? And this is 20 sessions later. You see the difference? That's movement. But can you notice the difference? Look at that. See that? You see that? So what we did was suppress the activity. Look how different the EEG looks. And if I look at the, we can do a comparison. Let's go like this. So I'm gonna go with analysis EEG spectra. Analysis EEG spectra for this. And we're going to look at the midline on this one, okay? And I'm going to go the same here, analysis, spectrum. Alright, so want you to pay attention to. Let's close this for a second. So look at the first one. Alright, so see the first one here? That's F3. That's F3. Look at FZ. And look at FZ. So you can see that the neurofeedback was able to suppress the activity. So choosing the right protocol is key to that. Alright? So how do we do that? I need a volunteer. I would like to get a volunteer for some training over here. And we'll take some time to look at some more EEGs. But I want to specifically talk about the training here. So who wants to come down and do some training? Anybody? So let's talk about the training for a second. Client comes in and you do amplitude training, right? So what you need to decide is either you do one channel or two channels. Who is doing two channel training? So most of you doing one channel training, right? It's fine. We all start with one channel. We want to feel confident what we're doing. We want to feel secure with what we're doing, right? Okay. Let me open up a few sessions here, and so I can show you what we can do. So the first thing is you're going to decide the protocol, right? And you decide the protocol based on the symptoms, based on when your mentor told you, based on when you read a book, based on a video that you saw. You decide the protocol based on any of those things, right? First thing, how long is the session? The sessions that I do are 45 minutes. No more, no less. There's people who like to do 1.5 hours. I think that's too much. I think 90 minutes of neurofeedback is too much for any person. Okay? So my recommendation is that you do between 30 minutes and 45 minutes. Now, 45 minutes of training. That's not counting the saying hello, the cooking up the client, and asking the question. So I do 45 minutes of actual training. Right? The minimum that you're going to need is 30 minutes. So I recommend that you go 40 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. You know, I think an hour is too much, especially for children. You know? So that's the one thing. First thing you need to take into account is the length of the session. Second, intensity and frequency of the sessions. I do at least 2 sessions a week. I never do 1 session a week. And I recommend that you don't do anything fewer than 1 session a week. I recommend that you do at least 2 sessions per week. Okay? Because the brain has a learning curve that we need to respect. Okay? And 1 session a week is not going to create neuroplasticity in most cases. If you want to create neuroplasticity, you need at least 2 sessions a week. If you want to go to 3 sessions a week, that's fine, but leave a day in between for resting. So, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, something like that. Now, there are clients that can withstand doing 3 sessions a week, back to back, 3 consecutive sessions. If they can do it, that's fine. I don't normally go 4 to 5 sessions a week unless the client comes from out of town. So let's say you have a client who comes from China, or you know, some other country, or even here in Taiwan, outside of Taipei, right? When I have clients that come out of town, I do 2 sessions a day 4 days a week. So for a total of 8 sessions in a week. Because I only work from Monday through Thursday. I don't work Fridays. Okay. And you can do that. 1 session in the morning, 1 session in the afternoon. It might be too much for some people, but it's tolerable. You know, it's if the client is coming from out of town, that can be done. But at least 2 sessions per week. All right. Now, the next thing is what type of protocol do you need? You can do 1 protocol for 20 sessions, or you can do 2 different protocols taking turns. For instance, let's say you have a client with anxiety and ADHD. So for the ADHD, you can either do the traditional CZ training, theta beta, theta SMR, right? And then for the anxiety, you want to do PZ. So 1 session you can do theta SMR, the other session you can do PC. 1 session you can do theta SMR, the other session you can do PC. That's absolutely fine. Don't be afraid to combine protocols. Which takes me to the next point. How do you know if the client is making progress? I usually go between 5 and 10 sessions. On average, a person will show changes between the first 5 to 10 sessions. So if 10 sessions have passed, right, and the client is not making progress, it's time to look at a different protocol. But it's also time to whether the client is eating well, is exercising, is not using technology too much. Because today this is a big problem. So if you have the client doing stuff and they're still using the technology, it's not gonna help. If they're still eating too much sugar, it's not gonna help. If they're not exercising, it's not gonna help. So, but give yourself about 10 sessions to know whether the client is working. Okay. So you need at least 10 sessions to see whether the client is working. The protocol is working. If not, try a different one. Now, it's important to know that some clients will not get better. You will always have a percentage of clients who are not going to get better, no matter what, for different reasons. Either the brain is not working for them, either the neurofeedback is not working for them, either they're not disciplined with the session, they don't want to change, but you accept that. Don't get frustrated, because you're never going to have a 100% success rate. So be aware that some neurofeedback is not going to work. So what you tell the client is, it doesn't work for everybody, but we can assure that it will work if you're disciplined with your eating, if you exercise, if you cut down technology, if you try to sleep well, if you do change of lifestyle, we can assume that it will work. And in most cases, it doesn't work when people are not disciplined. If they don't have the motivation, if they're dysfunctional, if they have a personality disorder, there's nothing you can do. But if the client's motivated, if the client's disciplined, it will work. Okay? So that's as far as the session goes. Now, always train the client when they're healthy. Never train the client if they have gastroenteritis, if they have a flu, if they have food poisoning, if they didn't sleep well the night before, if they have a migraine, and at least you're treating the migraine, do not train them when they're sick, because it's not going to work. If you come with a fever, let the body fight the fever. Neurofeedback is not going to work. And some parents will bring the kid to the session, even if the kid's has 100-degree fever and they're dying. You have to tell the parents, no, you have to let the body heal first. If the client comes from an empty stomach, do not train them. They have to come fed, so they have to have lunch, breakfast, or snack. Normally, what I do in my clinic is I have the client bring something to drink and something to eat. Cheese, shredded chicken, fruit, vegetables. I train for about 2 to 3 minutes. I stop and pause for about 2 minutes. The client eats something, they hydrate, and then we go again. So they're eating throughout the session, they're keeping hydrated throughout the session. And why is that? Because you're exercising the brain. The brain is going to spend energy. So you need to feed well. So protein is very good. Water or natural juice is very good. You know, no Coke or. One time I had these parents, and I told them, bring something to hydrate yourself with, and they came with a Coke like this for the child. And it doesn't make any sense. So, eating and hydrating. Okay. Now, during the session, you're gonna have to make decisions about how to train the client. Do you use audio training? Do you use video training? Do you use music training? What do you use? I say use all of them. I say use them in combination. Sometimes the training needs to be a little boring. Sometimes it needs to be a little entertaining. I don't recommend using movies all the time, because then the client gets too caught up in the movie, and that can be overstimulating. Sometimes you need to use simple things. So, for example, you can use that screen right there. And what is it? You're down training the theta, you're down training the high beta, and you're choosing what you want to up train, right? The idea is for the water to be as still as possible, right? So the more relaxed the client, the more the water is still. Now, you can use the visual, or you can add music to this. Okay? How do you know? Well, I always say start with something simple and easy to use. Start with one feedback. So in this case, use the water for a few sessions. If the client is better, start combining the feedback, the music with the water, for instance. Okay? Now, the first few sessions, the first 2 sessions, make it easy for the client. Let them win. So if they're playing a game, let them win. If they're watching that, let the water move. Make it easy for the client, because you don't want to generate frustration. It's very important that the client comes in and gets a sense of, oh, I can do this. Because if you make it too hard from the get-go, if you make it too hard from the first session, you're going to lose the client. So make it easy for them. Now, as far as the thresholds go, let's look at that. So, let's look at the thing. So you can do auto threshold, which is for the first 6 minutes, the threshold is going to move up and down automatically. I don't like auto threshold. I really don't. I don't see the point, and it can be very frustrating. The bar going up and down and the feedback going back and forth. I think it's too frustrating for the client. So as far as this goes, I would say off with the auto threshold. All right. What you want to do before the session begins, every session I recommend that you do a 1 minute baseline. Before every session, do a 1 minute baseline. So the client comes and they sit down, you put the sensor at CZ, and you tell the client, okay, please sit still. I'm going to do a baseline for 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, because sometimes you're going to have a little bit of noise. So for 1.5 minutes, they're sitting there and they're looking at the screen and nothing's happening, and you record baseline. It's important for 2 reasons. One, because it helps you with the threshold, set up the threshold for the session. And 2, it's going to tell you if the brain is getting better. Because let's say you're interested in the theta, and if during the baseline the theta is dropping, it means the training is being successful. So it's good for those 2 reasons. So always do a 1 minute baseline, 1.5 minute baseline before every session. Okay. At first you're going to forget again. It takes time to remember these things. So you sit the client down, 1.5 minute baseline, and we start training. All right. So here is the threshold. So here you have the time option. In this case, we're at the inhibit, right? So every time the theta goes above the threshold, this is the inhibit. How do you set up the threshold? Look at the baseline and start from there. Let's say that theta was at 15 during the baseline, okay? Put it at 20 at first, so it's easy for the client. So let's do a replay on this session so I can show you how. Let's open a session. All right, so this is a CCSMR training, basically. So let's assume that this is the baseline here, right? So I did the baseline, and the theta was at 13, the alpha was at 6, the beta was at 25, and so on and so forth. So with the theta being at 13, let's set it a little higher. So at the beginning of the session, it's easier. Don't set it at 13, especially at the beginning of the training, because it's going to be very frustrating for the client. All right? So you can set up at, we could say 16, 20, so 3 microvolts above, it's good enough, right? And so what you can do is do that setup. We go back to the session, and let's do a replay, and the session is working, right? So the theta you set up at, let's say 16, right? And then the high beta you want to set up at, I don't know, I start at 10, sometimes I start a little high, and here's for the SMR. The SMR I'm going to do at 2. And that's how I start. Now, what determines the changes? Well, it depends on how well the client is doing. So that's the one thing. You set up the threshold based on the baseline, and you start from there. If the client's doing very well, make it a little harder. Just a little harder. Don't make it too hard, because you don't want to go from doing too well to doing very poorly. Right? So you make it a little harder for the client. Now, sometimes I don't use thresholds. Sometimes I trust the client's brain and I trust their ability to do it. So what I do is I set up the threshold really high here and really high here, and I leave that one at that. And I see if they start getting better. So it's up to you. You know, I've been discovering recently, and when I say recently, within the last couple of months, that sometimes you gotta use threshold. The client knows what to do. If the client is struggling, then I'll go back to the threshold. But sometimes the threshold is too stress-inducing for the client, because the client is more focused into keeping the bar down as opposed to letting the brain do the work. So in that regard, you can set it up whichever way you want. So sometimes use no thresholds, sometimes use thresholds, go a little higher, and as the client gets better, make it a little harder, right?
Do you usually put so many bars in the screen?
Well, this one has that many bars, and I will leave it like that. Sometimes I use 1 bar, sometimes I use no bars. Again, what we want is not for the client to be focused on the bars. What we want is for the client to be focused on the feedback, which is the water in this case. Okay? If the bars are too distracting for the client, don't use them.
For the required time, I saw you put the 500
Yeah.
milliseconds.
So let's talk about the time. So the time, what Chen's talking about is the time, which is the time that it needs to be met for the feedback to be presented. So in this case, every time the bar crosses the threshold for theta, at least half a second, then it inhibits the feedback. So the water gets murky. The ripples get more frequent. Okay? The literature says that you need 250 milliseconds, so half a second, to get proper operant condition. Okay? Now, again, one thing is what the literature says, and a totally different thing, the real world. and what your client is doing. So, with that in mind, I usually start at 500 for at least the first 3 sessions, because I don't want to frustrate the client. Deciding the time settings is going to depend mostly on your client's ability. If the client is a slow learner and it takes a lot of time for them to get the neurofeedback, start with high periods of time. If they're fast learners, go to between 250 and 0. And again, it depends on what screen you're using. Depends on what screen and what type of training you're using. But if you see the client has good ability and they're fast learners and they get it very quickly, then go with the hard settings. Now, some sessions they're going to do well, some sessions they're going to do poorly. Some clients are going to come do to one session and they're going to do great, and the next session they're going to just not be there because they're happy, they're stressed out, they got bad news. Different things happen. But for the settings, between 250, 500, and 0 is fine. 0 if the client is very, very skilled. 250, they're mildly skilled, and if they take time, go to 500 for the inhibits. Okay. Now for the reward, so let's say we want to reward SMR. Here we have it at 0. So in essence, the SMR is going to be easier to make. But I'm thinking, no, I want to challenge this brain a little bit. So I'm going to start with 150 and see how it does. Again, there's no set universal timing presentation for the thresholds and the feedback. It really depends on your client's ability. It really depends on your clinical expertise and experience and instinct. And I know that at first when you learn this, you want concrete stuff. You want the mentor to tell you, do this, do that, and do that. And it's okay. Again, when I started, I wanted things as clear as I could. And I would tell my mentor, don't tell me all this information, just tell me one time. But as you learn, as you gain experience, you yourself seeing it for yourself. So, because you're starting, I'm going to say start between 250 and 500. And play with those. Okay? And as you get more experience, you get more confident, you're going to start playing around. But because your brain wants things in a concrete way, 250 and 500 is okay. For the settings. Now, sometimes you're going to have the client with a lot of activity. So the bar is going to be going up and down too quickly. What you can do for that is you can right click, go to display options and ranges, and you can smooth it out. So if you smooth it all the way, see how the bar changes? It's not jumping too much. So you can do some smoothing as well. And again, play with that. Play with that. So for the high beta, again, you can do 500, you can do 200, you can do 150, you can do a gazillion, you can do 0. Start between 250 and 500. Sometimes I go to 0, right? And I don't do auto threshold, and I put the bar right there. And I let the client do their own training. In that, I trust their brain's ability to do it. But if you want to feel sure, if you want to feel validated in a way, do at least a minimum of 250 or 500. So 250 or 500 is good. If the client is doing poorly, go to 500. So it makes it a little easier for them. If they're doing well, go to 250. If they're doing extremely well, go to 0 and see how they do. Because the brain likes variety. The brain doesn't like doing the same thing over and over and over. So sometimes we gotta